welcome to 24/7 Lifestyle with me, Charlie. Today's interview, I'm very excited to say, is with an absolute music legend with a career spanning over 4 decades. He has found success across various bands, most notably Ultravox. He then went on to have a successful career as a solo artist and as a producer. He revolutionised a new wave of music in the 1970s, and if that wasn't enough, he was the co-organiser of both Band Aid and the infamous Live Aid event in 1985. It's, of course, none other than Mr. Midge Ure. Welcome, Midge.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we're just really looking forward to having a good old chat with you.
Good, fire away.
Fabulous. So I wanted to start at the beginning. You've had an eclectic career. You've done some absolutely incredible things. And I know you've spoken before about how music from a really young age was a kind of escape for you, like listening to the radio and tuning into kind of whatever you could get your hands on was quite a core memory. So what you've described the early pull towards music as something deep and quite emotional, even though it all felt quite unattainable at the time. So what do you think it was about music at that point that felt so powerful? Like, was it just an escape, or was it, was there a sense that you kind of like needed to be a part of it somehow?
I think it was, as a kid growing up in the outskirts of Glasgow in a tenement, a one-bedroom tenement. We didn't have much, but we had a radio, and radio was a connector. Radio was, it fed you a lifeline to a world that you didn't inhabit, and you thought you would never inhabit. So listening to music, which is no different today, you put on your headphones, you play something, and you're transported somewhere else. And living in a tenement slum, that was quite important, that your fantasist side could be transported away to anywhere on the planet. You could be in America listening to American tune. You could be in the South Seas listening to a particular song. You could be in Australia listening to a particular song. And that to me was not a means of escape, but like a door, like a conduit from the reality I was in to what was possibly out there in the big wide world.
Yeah, of course. It's so interesting because you didn't come from a musical family necessarily, did you? But you were clearly like absorbing everything you could kind of get your hands on, the radio, as you've said, records, anything around you. Do you think that kind of almost lack of formal direction in a sense is maybe why you ended up blending so many genres throughout your career, which obviously is what you're so, awarded for in your career?
I think it's partly that, and maybe partly, the fact that radio then just played this very, very eclectic selection of music. So it was even before, Radio One had come
Wow.
on with like pop music, pop stations. So you had this collective thing of, you'd be listening to Frank Sinatra 1 minute and then you'd be listening to an early Beatles tune the next, or whatever. So it was a real odd combination of things. But also the fact that I think the world thinks that you're growing up and you stop maturing when you hit 20. So what you thought and what you did when you were 20 is radically different from what you think and do when you're 40. And you don't stop growing. You're like a sponge. You keep
Yeah.
sucking up these other influences and all these other notions that you think, well, I want to go and try this. I want to go and do that. So there's not a level where you go, that's what I do and I don't do anything but. Everything you think you've achieved, there's another step beyond that. And that's the same with music. It evolves into other things. So I didn't sit down and try and create, what's the next thing that I've got to jump on, or the next thing I've got to do. It molds, it morphs from what you're doing into something else as you grow older, because your standards change, your ideas change, and your goals change. So yeah, a combination of hearing radio very confused in the younger days, and still searching, even though you were kind of infamous for some of the things you'd done, searching for that musical band, that musical connection where you felt at home. And that took
Yeah.
me all the way up to Ultravox.
That's amazing because your sound has always kind of lived between worlds. You've got those rock influences, the synth came in, pop, even orchestral to, some degree with those types of textures. And in the late 70s and 80s, that fusion was, it's ahead of its time, which, I'm sure you're aware of. Like it's fantastic. I think something that I'm quite interested in is when people talk about that era now, whether it be in regards to music, fashion culture, whatever, it's often through quite a stylized lens. Do you feel that that era, mainly being the 80s, maybe does get a little bit, over romanticized? Or do you think there is like a level of truth to how people remember or want to recall that, cultural explosion of the time?
Well, it's funny because it is twisted somewhat. I do some of these 80s festivals in the UK where it's mainly based on 80s artists, and the audience turn up wearing, day glow tutus and leg
Yeah.
warmers and, just crazy stuff. But it wasn't actually like that in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was different. So it's become a cartoon version of what it actually
Mm,
was. And it's an era that's kind of dismissed because of the fashion and the style and the
yeah.
graphics and whatever. They were all peripheries. It all came from music, it all stemmed from music. You look at any genre, any period, any time period in music, 60s, you had the
Yeah.
Beatles and the Cavern in Liverpool. And that's when teenagers all of a sudden had a style of their own. Mary Quant, miniskirts, all of that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, teenagers could look like teenagers as opposed to sawing off versions of their parents. You know, 70s, the glam rock, everyone wanted to look like David Bowie. So style was part of the music
Mm,
evolution. Same with the 80s. Electronics, synthesizers became slightly more affordable. Home recording was happening. You didn't need to go cap in hand to a big record label to ask to make a record. That had a style associated with that type of
mm,
music. And that's the way it is. Look at Oasis right now, out there
yeah.
playing these concerts. The audience is full of people who dress as they did in the
Hmm.
90s. They've got their bucket
Bucket
hats
hats
and little
equipped.
t-shirts, all of
Yeah.
that stuff. And they will forever be associated with that particular look. But
Yeah, of
that doesn't
course.
mean the look overpowered the music.
Mm,
The music dictated what the look was going to be.
yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think something I find interesting is that, bands like Ultravox who were, you were pushing the boundaries sonically. And I don't think it often, it gets the spotlight in comparison to maybe the more image driven, the new romantic acts like Duran Duran that were too soon to follow and all those types of things. Do you think that the experimental side of that, that new wave movement is maybe a bit overlooked, or do you think that's maybe changed now in modern music?
I think there's an element that was kind of overlooked. The Ultravox were associated with the whole new romantic thing, and I understand why, because of our connection, Billy and I's connection with Visage,
Hmm.
coming out of the Blitz. But Ultravox were a very different animal. We were more rock or prog rock than
Hmm.
new romantic.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of bands came out at that time who jumped on the electronic thing, and it was standard pop music but with electronics. Whereas
Hmm.
Ultravox were constantly trying to, uncover something interesting. I mean, putting Vienna out as a single was a
Yeah.
ludicrous idea. Too long. It's sped up. It slows down. It's
Hmm.
it's got a viola solo. It's got synthesizers.
Yeah,
It was a real oddity at the time,
of course.
and never expected to be commercially successful. But people look at it now and go, "Yeah, obviously it was going to be a hit record." No, it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't. It was the antithesis of a hit record at the time.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes the fashion and style can overshadow in the public eye
Hmm.
what was actually going on with the music. But as I keep saying, the music came first. It's like that
Yeah.
music was the seed, and everything else that
Hmm.
came out afterwards was affected by that seed.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. Obviously, Vienna just went out to have this whole lease of life that's just, it's now in the Hall of Fame of, that era, which is fantastic. It's so interesting how, I know you've spoken before about how, you had people in your ear going, it's not right, it's not right. And, it went on to become, have an incredible lease of life to it, which still lives on today, which is amazing. I think going back to the genre thing a little bit then. So thanks obviously to now modern age of music, you've got tech, streaming, crossovers, social media, everything that impacts these, elements of music. And it's taken away almost from, I think, that raw element of what music is and what it is at its core. And I think it's something that is forgotten quite a lot. Do you think with that, then it's difficult now to define what a new wave actually looks like? Obviously, I feel like in the past, it's easier to differentiate between these genres and kind of you can establish, as you've said previously, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, you've got your genres within that. But do you think that music has evolved into something just a lot more fluid now, or do you think we can still establish between them?
I think it's a very difficult thing to uncover these days. You know, back in the day, yes, you're quite right. Different genres of music all had a place, and they all had a little bit of breathing space. And there were a multitude of record labels who would take a chance
Yeah,
because they could afford to take a chance. So they would have, I don't know, 20 artists on their label,
yeah,
two of whom sold gazillions of records, but 18 of whom were experimental, but they could
hmm,
afford to try out and eke out something new and different and see
yeah,
if it would grow. These days, those labels don't exist. They've all been bought up by
yeah,
the big five, the big labels out there
yeah,
control everything. And the wherewithal to invest in something that's radically different isn't there. It doesn't exist. They're
yeah,
scared to do it because they'll
hmm,
lose money and therefore they'll lose a job and whatever. The,
yeah,
the industry is going through a very difficult phase. So that reflects on the fact that you're not seeing as many radical artists coming out. I'm saying it's a massive generality because there are interesting artists out there, but they have to find a different route of
yeah,
doing it. They have to do it
yeah,
themselves. These days, you can't just depend on being a good singer, a good drummer, or whatever, and getting
hmm,
joined in a band, and that's enough. You
yeah,
have to be great at social media. You have to be great at home recording. You have to be great at graphics. You have to be able to direct your own videos. You have to
yeah,
do
of
your own
course.
photographs. You have to do, all of that stuff. You have to be all of these things, just to get your head
Yeah,
above water.
yeah,
And even then, that's not guaranteed.
yeah. It's been like a jack of all trades for the industry that used to probably have, those individual roles set aside for all of that,
Absolutely,
which is
absolutely. You've got
it's
to
just,
you've got to do
yeah,
what a team of 100 people would normally do back in
yeah,
the day. You've got to be able to do PR, you've got to plug your records, you've got to, all of
yeah,
that stuff. And that detracts from the actual source of all of that, which is the music.
yeah, of course, 100%. So going on to then a bit more on Ultravox, obviously, as I've said already, you've had an incredible career. You've gone from so many different bands, you've had Silk, Rich Kids, Thin Lizzy for the moment, you had Visage, as you've said, and then you finally found Ultravox. And then it's interesting because, quite soon after you landed in that, in your role in Ultravox, you kind of then, it quite quickly turned into that producer side more, and you became more, you said you become more interested in the songwriting side of things, the producing and all these types of things that, Band Aid and Live Aid was soon to spiral quite soon after. So do you feel like Ultravox kind of came at the right time for you? Because I know you had to kind of take a break from it after the Band Aid, Live Aid stuff all went absolutely like, astronomically, it's Live Aid, it went amazing. So do you think Ultravox came at the right time for you?
Absolutely. I'd been delving into production with the Visage project, and that's how I met Billy, the keyboard player on Ultravox.
Yeah,
But the Visage project, because we were begging and stealing and borrowing studio time to make
yeah,
this, and the fact that a lot of the musicians involved were already in their own bands and they were touring and whatever. So trying to get us all together at one point was almost impossible. So we had to leave
hmm,
months of gaps in between when we could all get together and record.
well,
So I saw Ultravox as they were then fall apart. They came back from an American tour without the singer, without the guitarist,
yeah,
without a record label.
wow,
That was the band that I joined. Not
wow,
not not the best job opportunity in the world that you would think of, but I loved what these guys were doing. And the moment we
yeah,
made a noise, it was just fantastic. And
yeah,
that was my calling. So that came exactly at the right moment.
yeah,
And you're quite right. It was great for a long time. I learned a huge amount from those guys, and it was reciprocal. We all learned from each other. We worked
hmm,
incredibly well as a team.
hmm,
But when Band Aid and Live Aid came along, it took me away from the band for a couple of
yeah,
years.
hmm,
And when we got back together again, like any relationship,
hmm,
2 years, you're different people. You've moved
yeah,
on, you've done different things. And it just
yeah,
didn't feel right when we got back. So we always vowed that if it didn't work, we wouldn't do it.
that's incredible. It's amazing because I can imagine you've had this absolutely incredible life experience doing what you did with Band Aid and Live Aid, and yourself and Bob Geldof doing this incredible thing that is spoken about so fondly. I've got it's leading into my next question, to be honest. Like, I can't not talk about Live Aid. And obviously, again, recently had your 40th anniversary, which is just absolutely incredible for all the work that you guys continue to do. But I personally have grown up, obviously, of a younger era. But, my dad and my aunt fondly recalling the day of Live Aid and manically trying to record the tapes and trying to record the whole thing on their tapes and like get it all sorted. And these just incredible stories that I'm sure so many people share as well. And seeing all the performances, it's just, I've personally grown up on it, so that's just like a personal thing that I had to share. But I just wanted to ask you, we've heard of the amazing stories of Queen's performance, Quo opening, all these incredible things, but do you have almost that, maybe a magic in a bottle type moment that it might not have made the headlines, just like a personal moment that's maybe always stuck with you that you think back to now and you're like, wow, that is just like, that was very special personally for me?
I think that there are numerous standout moments. I mean, a lot of it's kind of vague because it all melded into one great big moment, the whole thing. But the individual moments, yes, I still recall those. One was meeting Freddie Mercury for the first time, the only time, and him thinking I was from the Boomtown Rats, which was the result that I actually wanted. But that, Harvey Goldsmith talking about losing the connection to the shuttle, which was the space shuttle. And at that moment, I just thought, nothing gets bigger than this. Nothing can, in my lifetime, get bigger than this actual moment. And not knowing that the television audience, which I don't think Ultravox played to because we were on at the very beginning, but the television reach on that performance, that concert was almost 2 billion people. I mean, that's just immense. And it's figures that our little brains cannot calculate. We cannot imagine what 2 billion people look like. And they were all connected on their television screens because of that music. And it was just such an amazing thing. It showed the power that music wielded, certainly back then, and could possibly wield again.
Yeah, as a united front, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's just, I think it stood the test of time, really. And I know you've said before, but it probably can't happen again, which I think makes it more special because it's, the impact it had and continues to have it's phenomenal. So that is, it's just fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So just moving on to the touring side of things. So you've recently played quite a few brilliant festivals, including the Isle of Wight. And, I think there's something really special about, legacy artists playing to like multi-generational crowds. And I think it's one, I think the biggest example is obviously Glastonbury. It's no different and it does it the best and it caters to everybody. And it's, Worthy Farm's a very special place. So you played Glasgow back in, I believe, 2005. I think you played.
I've never done Glastonbury.
You've never done Glastonbury?
No, I've never done Glastonbury. So it's elusive so far.
Right. Bless you. Is that something that, so I know you've said before that like you've never really, or at least in your younger career, you never had like a direct, ambition. You just would like music, creativity. That is what's important to me. Is Glastonbury maybe a bit of an exception? Is it maybe like now becoming more of a would like to tick it off?
I think probably for my daughters more than me. I think they'd like it because then they'd be guaranteed a ticket that year. Because like everyone else, they have to do the lottery. They have to, get multiple computers all running at once, trying to buy the ticket in the short window that you get.
It's no easy game.
I think it would be something that they would like, not necessarily to watch me, but to get in. You know what? Things unfold. You cannot. You cannot dictate where your life's going to go, and you can't make things happen. It's like when people say, "Oh, that record wasn't a hit, or that song didn't happen. It didn't really chart." I think I lose control over what happens with pieces of music or anything I do when I hand it across to someone else. I can't control. I can't make people listen to something. I can't make radio play it. I can't make people buy it or whatever. So I'm at the beholding of a gazillion other people before your music gets out there. And that's the same for what happens between now and next week. An email, someone saying, "Hi, how do you fancy?" And you go, "Whoa, I never thought of that. That sounds great." Or, or equally a phone call, whatever. You bump into someone who says, "Oh, let's do a duet." It's
Hmm.
not planned. It's not written on a spreadsheet or a piece of paper. It's how life unfolds. And mine has been a bizarre, interesting
Amazing,
journey.
yeah.
Yeah, a ridiculous journey. Yeah,
It's incredible. No, that's good. I think that's the best way to be, isn't it? Where you just, you let the opportunities come to you and
absolutely.
see what happens. No, that's fantastic. I think just a little bit more on the touring side of things. So you're going on tour May next year. You've been touring for a very long time, and you've done it for, you've done it with bands, you've done it solo, you catered to a lot of different audiences, and I'm sure you've seen how audiences have evolved. I can imagine drastically in the last, 15, 20 years or so, especially. And I'm sure it feels very different to how it did, back in the 80s. So what would you say is maybe like the biggest shift in terms of how touring works today compared to back then? Or is there anything that you maybe struggle to adjust to, or is there still something that you kind of maybe would prefer it to go back to like an older age, whether it be, the obvious one is mobile phones at concerts? That's like such a big conversation.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of people have commented on the rerun of some of the Live Aid performance on television
Mm,
recently, and they commented on no mobile phones, nobody
hmm.
recording it, people remembering it, no
Yeah,
flags waving in the air. It was just people absolutely absorbed in the music that was coming off the stage.
yeah,
That's it. No distractions, just that.
yeah,
Yeah, well, on the new tour, yes. I mean, there are key things that I want to do. I want to play some instrumental pieces that I've written over the years, and I want to incorporate those in amongst the hits and things. The big change, I think, is the cost of touring, not just for the
yeah,
artists touring, but the costs of tickets for people to go and see a performance.
yeah.
The
Mhm.
balance between trying to keep the tickets at a reasonable price that make them affordable and
Mhm.
palatable, but
Mhm.
still put something on stage that can compete in its own little
Yeah,
way with the multi-million-pound performances you see in football
yeah,
stadiums and whatever. So
yeah,
that's a massive change. Whereas, back, you know, back in the day, I suppose in the 70s or 80s, people went and saw a band, some flashing lights, and that's it. It was fine. Now they
yeah,
expect 50 dancers, an orchestra,
yeah,
multiple screens, things flying around the auditorium.
yeah.
They want this immersive 3D, multi sensational thing.
Mhm.
And you can't get that for
Yeah.
30 quid. It
No,
just doesn't work. So that's
yeah,
a massive seismic change.
imagine.
And not just for an established artist, but for new artists. How do you go out there
Yeah,
and compete with that
yeah.
stuff? But it's getting to the point where people still want to resonate with live music, played well, done well,
Mhm.
because there's a sensation that AI or television or radio cannot
Yeah,
recreate, and
no,
that's the live audience, participation, the sensation you get.
absolutely. You said about like the cost of it being £30. I'm a big gig goer myself, and my dad saw the Freddie Mercury tribute concert for 30 quid at Wembley, and it's like that even now won't even get you in for, the O2 Ritz in Manchester. You
It
can't
might
even get to your
it might
smaller
get you it might
venues.
get you a hamburger in one of those events.
Might get, yeah, exactly. Might get you some food possibly if you're
That's
lucky,
it,
but
possibly,
it's,
possibly.
yeah, yeah, no, it's just, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, as a gig goer myself, it's, you know, I'm I'm early 20s, and it's, I've been going since I was quite young, and even in that quite short space of time, 5 or 6 years I've been going to concerts, it's, double, triple,
Yeah,
quadruple the price of original, and that's for the same band that, have maybe not necessarily gotten too much bigger, but their prices have gotten much bigger, which is, it is hard. It is a very hard, fine line, isn't it?
it is. It's a
Um,
very delicate balance because
mm,
things changed after lockdown
hmm.
and the industry got hammered and understandably the costs went rocketing. The costs
Yeah,
went up on every level,
of course.
except what the artist might be able to get at the end of the tour if he's lucky enough to
Yeah,
get anything.
absolutely.
So you're the bottom of the heap. Everything else has to be done
Yeah,
cost.
yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. So, just as a closing question, then, because I know that we are short on time, but so when you think back to being that little kid from Glasgow who begged for a guitar, you sang in the scouts, you sang in the schools, you did all these things, and you reached out for all these like any tangible sense of creativity that you could get your hands on. You're still touring, you're still innovating, you're still connecting with people at these gigs, as you said. Do you ever kind of have those, do you still have those pinch me moments or the I made it moments? Or is it just kind of now, it's, or as you said, all kind of mashed into this like insane journey?
It's you never lose that pinch me moment. If you do lose that excitement of standing on stage with someone that you've loved and admired, you shouldn't be on the stage. You know, it's that's what it's all about. We're all fans of someone else. That's why we started in this weird path. That's why we jumped into the industry that we are. Whatever industry it happens to be, you do it because you love someone else doing it better than you. And to find yourself on the same kind of platform as them is still overwhelming, you know.
Yeah.
And if that ceases to happen, that's the time you hang up your guitar and walk away from it because you've died inside.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I think that's, I think a lot of artists can take a page out of that book 'cause it's, yeah, it is, I can't imagine it never being, an absolute pleasure. So that's fantastic. Well, Midge, thank you so very much for this chat. It was a pleasure to meet and speak with you. And best of luck with your tour, A Man of Two Worlds, which starts in May next year.
It's been a pleasure, Charlie. Thank you very much.